All right, Rabbi, good morning. Such a schos Baruch Hashem to be able to learn the daf together, Yerushalayim Mir HaKodesh. Begin by thanking our sponsor for this morning's shir, our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, the Tilson Mishpacha of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the Shir and Drashos this year as a zechus for Besoros Tavos for Am Yisrael. Halavai we should see Emir Hashem that bracha binis kayim, Emir Hashem bekarov. So with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Samech 65. We are actually picking up on Samech Daled Amud Beis 64b, and we left off Amrav Yehuda, which is about I would say about 20 lines up from the bottom, right here. It's a longer daf. Right across from Tosas V'chi Shlosha Olamos. So if you see Tosas on the right, just move your finger towards the left, and you'll see exactly where we are. Amrav Yehuda. Enu chayv ad she'avirenu derech havara. So remember again, we're speaking about Molech. So we're speaking about Molech. So remember again, in the Avodah Zarah of Molech. So this whole Avodah Zarah is all about going ahead and it's child sacrifice. So it's taking one's child and passing it through fire. So now we're going to see an interesting machlokes, exactly how the Avodah Zarah was performed. So the Gemara says, Hechi Dami, how exactly or what does the Avodah Zarah actually look like? So the Gemara says, Amar Abaye, Shraga de livni b'mitzi, Nura mehai gisa v'nura mehai gisa. So Abaye says like this, there would be a fire on two sides and a pathway made of bricks. And the idea was that a parent would pass their child. Remember, as we saw in yesterday's daf, you'd give over your child to the Avodah Zarah, and the Komer, the priest of the Avodah Zarah, would lead the child through the pathway between the fires. So a brick path, fire on both sides. That was the Avodah Zarah. Rava says, no. Kimashvarta de Puria. Rava says, no. Molech looks like, literally again, the way people jump on Purim. Now listen, what does that mean? If you take a look at Rashi says over Rava Amar Kimishvarta de Puria, it's about 5 lines up from before it gets wide. Eino ma'avira baraglov, ela kolfetz baraglov kider shatinokos, kovtzin mimei Purim, shahaisa chafira ba'aretz, va'ish boerbo, v'u kolfetz misafa l'safa. So interestingly enough, Rava says, Molech wasn't walking on a path between two fires. Instead, what Molech was ultimately, again, jumping over a pit. There was a pit with fire, and you would jump over the pit. And if you made it, you made it. If you didn't, you didn't. So Rava compares it to what people do on Purim. So often what happens on Purim, I guess one of the Purim pastimes. Okay, we can maybe introduce this, right? One of the Purim not with fire. One of the Purim pastimes was, jumping over a pit, or jumping over, seeing how far you could jump. So Rava compares this, that's a most. So therefore, fundamental machlokes, exactly what Molech looked like. So Abaye, literally again, a brick path in between two fires. Rava, jumping over a pit of fire. Tanya Kaval say the Rava. We have a Bryce that supports Rava. Eino chayiv ad shiavirenu derech avara. So derech avara. So and Bryce supports Rava. That halacha l'maisa. Again, you're not chayiv until you go ahead and you pass over the way that people normally pass over Molech. All right. Havira berega potter. Interestingly enough, if you go ahead and let's say a parent carries their child. So let's say again, remember, a parent carries their child through Molech. Ultimately, again, potter. So again, I will say that's because we saw before that the only way to go ahead and violate Molech is in a very specific way, giving it over to the priests of Molech, and then ultimately, again, the priest leading the child or causing the child to go through. But if the parent carries the child through Molech, then ultimately, again, one is potter, meaning that that's not the form of Avodah Zarah. So I'll say, there's an interesting Musar Haskell in this also, if you think about it, that it's not Molech if you carry your child through. In other words, it's only Avodah Zarah if the child walks on their own. So remember, there's tremendous lessons to be learned from Avodah Zarah as well, which Lamaisa, you only transgress if the child walks on his own. If you're going to carry your child through life, they're not going to be successful. In other words, it's only called Avodah Zarah if the kid walks on their own. Whatever is true for Avodah Zarah is true for the rest of life as well. As parents, we naturally want to give to our children. We naturally want to do for our children. We naturally want to be there for their children. And that's beautiful. But at a certain point in time, it is incredibly important that we teach our children to walk on their own, that our children are able to move forward on their own. Because if we're always supporting them and we're always holding them, then at the end of the day, sometimes we're enabling their non-growth. A child always has to know that the parent is there, but a child also has to learn to walk on their own and to be successful on their own. So the Gemara goes right, Ve'eno chayiv ela al yotzei yirecho. And ultimately, again, one is only chayiv. One is, interestingly enough, molech is only done with one's own children. Interesting. The Gemara says, "Haketzad bino ubito chayiv." So if a parent goes ahead and brings his son or his daughter through molech, then you're chayiv. Aviv v'imo ve'echa v'achosa pater. But ultimately, again, if you bring your parents or you bring your siblings through molech, then you're pater. Have your atzmo pater. Similarly, again, if you take yourself through molech, you're also pater. Now again, I will say, obviously, it's not good, but what it's saying is, in order to transgress the avodah zarah of molech, there is a specific and a scripted way in which one transgresses. Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon Mechayev. Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon says, no, if you walk yourself through molech, ultimately, again, you are chayiv as well. So the Gemara says, Echa lemolech ve'echa l'shar avodah zarah, chayiv. So ultimately, again, so now I'll say, interestingly enough, whether you go ahead and pass your own child through molech or any other avodah zarah, you're chayiv. Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon Omer, lemolech chayiv, shelo lemolech pater. Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon says, no. The yisod of offering up one's child is only a din in molech, not a din in any avodah, not a din in any other avodah zara. Amar Ula, my time is Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon. What's Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar's logic? Amar Kra, lo yimatze b'cha ba'atzmecha, v'rabbanan lo darshi b'cha. So we'll say, what's Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon's logic? He's that even if one offers themselves up to molech, so to speak, that one is chayiv, because Torah use lashon of b'cha, in you, and the rabbanan don't darshan b'cha. I v'hatnan, they don't darshan b'cha. What about the following halacha? Avedasa va'avedas aviv shelo kodemes. So I'll say, interestingly enough, let's say if I lost something and my father lost something, the halacha is that my lost object takes precedence. In other words, that I have the right to seek out my lost object before I look for my father's lost object. What's the reason? The Gemara says, "V'amina my time, Bar Rabbi Yehuda Amakra, Efes kilo yebecha evion." The Torah says that there should not be anyone who is an evion, anyone impoverished in you. Shelo kodemes l'shel kol adam. Ultimately, we'll say, this is an incredible idea. Your lost object comes before anyone else's lost object. So this will say, so again, it happens here. First, let's look at the halacha. So the halacha itself is that if I lose something and my father loses something, so whose object should I try to seek out first? So it'd be tempting to say, my father. After all, again, kibod dava'im, honoring parents. The Torah comes along and says, Efes kilo yebicha evion. There should not be anyone indigent? Indigent, is that the right word? Indigent, right? Impoverished, right? There shouldn't be anyone impoverished or poor in you, which means that ultimately, again, your financial status or your financial well-being comes before someone else's financial well-being. So therefore, again, if it's a question of finding my own lost object or someone else's lost object, even if that someone else is my father, my lost object comes first. My financial security comes before anyone else's. To which the Gemara says, Hasam me'efes. That's because Torah used lashon of efes. Rabbi Yossi. So again, I just want to point out something very interesting over here, which is this idea that avedasa va'avedas aviv. So we spoke about this, I think, even like our opening night of Yarchei Kala, that, we all have things inside of us that are broken, and we all have things inside of us that are lost. But there are other people around us also who have things that are broken and things that are lost. The Gemara is telling us that halacha l'maisa, first repair that which is lost and broken inside yourself. Deal with that first before you deal with the world around you. Because if I walk around as a broken person, it's going to be much harder for me to repair the things that are broken all around me. But if I fix that which is broken inside of me, if I find that which is lost inside of me first, then ultimately, again, I have the ability to help repair that which is broken around me and to help to find that which is lost around me as well. But if I never take the time to repair myself, if I never take the time to go out and find that which is lost inside of myself, it's very hard to affect change all around me. It's like this, there's this incredible tension for the Jew about being there for myself, but being there for other people as well. And on one hand, sometimes the best way to repair yourself is through helping other people, but sometimes there's this recognition that as long as I am in a state of disrepair, as long as I have not yet found my Aveda, what's missing from me, it's very hard to affect change. So there's this dialectic. You can't just be there for yourself. You have to be there for other people as well. But yet, I really can't be there for other people until I know that that which is broken and that which is lost inside of me has really been truly repaired and has really been found. Incredible Gemara. All right, let's go weiter. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. Shalosh krisos ba'avodah zara lama. So we'll say, why is kares mentioned 3 times in the context of avodah zara? To which the Gemara answers, achos l'kedarka, va'achos shelo kedarka, va'achos l'molech. So one is teaching about the prohibition to worship avodah zara in its normal fashion. The other is teaching me about worshiping avodah zara even in an abnormal fashion. That means, again, even if it's not accepted mode of worship. And the third is for molech. So we'll say, remember again, we see a theme over here. Molech is avodah zara, but interestingly enough, molech is almost put in its own category of avodah zara. Okay? Well, molech avodah zara he, but according to the opinion that says that molech is treated like any other form of avodah zara, kares b'molech lamali. Why do I need that third kares by molech? Lamavir b'no shelo kidarka. Ultimately, again, to teach me that alocha l'maisa, if I offer up my child shelo kedarka. Shelo kedarka means to another avodah zara, even besides molech, that is still going to be prohibited. Uleman darim megadef avodah zara he kares b'megadef lamli. And according to the one who says that megadef, blasphemy, cursing on Kodesh Baruch Hu, is a form of avodah zara. So why do I need kares by megadef? Lechidisanya he kares ti kares. He kares ba'olam hazeh ti kares the olam haba divrei Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva says ultimately, again, for. In other words, if there's already kares in this world, already kares in the next world, so what else do you need kares for? Ella v'nichrasa ba'olam hazeh he kares the olam haba ti kares dibra Torah kalasha manei adam. Senachinami, one kares is for this world, one kares is for the world to come, and ultimately, again, the third lashon of kares is because the Torah speaks in the vernacular of man. Incredible, incredible. All right, we'll say top of Samechei, new Mishnah, 65a. Says the Mishnah, Bal Ov. So we'll say, so now we're moving on to a new form of avodah zara. So right, we've done molech. Now we're moving on to Ov and Yedoni. Says the Mishnah. So Bal Ov. So what's Ov? What is Ov? So we'll say, in English we use the word necromancy, right? So necromancy refers to communicating with the dead. So these are all different forms of sorcery that are designed to communicate with the dead. So Baal Ov ze pitom hamendaber meshechio. So we'll say, so Ov refers to someone ultimately again who communicates with the dead through his armpit. Through his armpit. Take a look at Rashi. Pitom shem hamechashev hamendaber meshechio mala as hamis mina aretz umoshev lo b'shechio tachas ra'osav umedaber mishechi. So this is literally how it worked. So you go ahead and summon up the spirit of the dead, and the dead would speak through the armpit of the individual. All right? That's Ov. The Yedoni. What's Yedoni? This is someone who summons up the dead, and the dead speaks through the mouth of the sorcerer. Now we're going to see, it's not just through the mouth, it was a little bit more involved than that. If you look at Rashi says over here, Yedonim medaber beviv, kid mefarish b'gemara, chaya achos, sheshma yadua, umachnis mimena etzam l'soch piv. In fact, what ended up happening over here is the Yedoni would put a bone in his mouth, and ultimately, again, the dead would communicate through the bone. Okay? So the Gemara says, Vanisha v'hare elu b'skila. So again, Ov and Yedoni are both punishable by skila. Vanisha b'hem ba'azhara. And ultimately, again, if you consult the Ov Yedoni, that is allowed. So not only is the sorcerer himself chayiv misa, chayiv skila, but ultimately one who consults the Ov Yedoni is in violation of a lav as well. All right, says the Gemara. So ma'ishna hacha diktani bal Ov Yedoni, or ma'ishna gabe krisos diktani bal Ov v'shayre li Yedoni. So that's an interesting question. So over here in our Mishnah, the Mishnah mentions both Ov and Yedoni, even though in reality, in other words, it's the same thing. they're both communicating with the dead. That's the prohibition over here. It happens to be again, Ov does it through the armpit, Yidoni does it through the mouth, but it's the same idea. So here it mentions both Ov and Yidoni, but yet again, Abba saying another brisa, or by Krisus, right? It only mentions Ov, doesn't mention Yidoni. So what's the pshat? Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Holu shnei b'lav echa nemru. Rabbi Yochanan says, look, because it's the same lav. So you don't really need to mention both, you just need to mention one, and the other one is automatically included. Reish Lakish Amar, Yidoni lefi she'ein bo maisa. So interestingly enough, so again, the Ov is mentioned, but the Yidoni is not mentioned. Why? Because he has no maisa. There's no Maisa that's there. If you look at Rashi says, Reish Lakish Amar Yidoni, Lahachi lo tanina le lahasam mishum dafilu ki avele ba'ape nafshe lav bar karbanu lefi she'ein bo Maisa. So this is interesting. So Rabbi Reish Lakish wants to suggest that the Yidoni doesn't have any action. Since the Yidoni ultimately, again, is just dibor, just speech, and speech is not a Maisa. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan, Maishna bal ov dinakit. So ultimately, Rabbi Yochanan, why is it that Ov is mentioned in that second Mishnah by Krisos and Yidoni is not? Mishum the Pasach Beikra, because it's mentioned first in the Pasuk. Reish Lakish, my time lo Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Why doesn't Reish Lakish like Rabbi Yochanan? Amar Papa Chalukin Hein B'Misa. Because ultimately, again, they are distinguished, they are separated in terms of their Chiyav Misa. Rabbi Yochanan, Chaluka Delav Shma Chaluka, Demisa Lo Shma Chaluka. Rabbi Yochanan will say ultimately, again, when they are distinguished by a lav, that's called the distinction, but a distinction by Misa is not called a distinction. And Rabbi Yochanan, my time Amar Reish Lakish. Why does Rabbi Yochanan say that Reish Lakish? Amar lechamas nisim dekrisos Rabbi Akiva he da Amar lo ba'inan ma'isa. The Mishnah ultimately again by krisos reflects the view of Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva holds that even without a ma'isa, even without an action, there is liability. Reish Lakish nehid lo boy Rabbi Akiva ma'isa rabba ma'isa zuta boy. But even according to Rabbi Akiva, maybe Rabbi Akiva holds you don't need a grand ma'isa, you don't need a significant ma'isa, but you still need some type of ma'isa. So the Gemara says megadef my ma'isa ika. But one second, if that's the case that you need a maisa, you need an action in order to generate liability, so then how are you chayiv by megadef, right? Megadef is the blasphemer, the one who curses HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What is cursing involved? Dibor, right? So what's the maisa? What's the action by megadef? So the Gemara says, Ika akimas. I'm sorry, my maisa Ika akimas svasav havi maisa. The act of akimas svasav means articulation of the lips. The act of articulation of the lips, that by itself is the maisa. Bal ov my maisa ika. So we'll say by the ov. What maisa? Remember again, the ov is the guy who's summoning up the dead through his armpit. So what maisa is there by ov? Ika hakashas ra'os have maisa. Apparently, in order to make this work, you have to flap your arms a little bit. Right, I guess like to get like the armpit warmed up, you know. So the maisa, right? That's the ov, right? I'm sorry. That's an excellent question. I'm going to get back to you on that one. So the maisa, it probably looks better if you do both, right? Like so the maisa, so that's the action. That's the action. In other words, the flapping of the arms, that's the action. Afil Rabbanon, similar to Afil Rabbanon, is that you're going to Rabbanon, Vatanya inu chayiv ela davar sheish b'maisa, kigon zibuach ki travinisoch v'ishtachava. Yet Rabbi said the Brisa says as follows: by avodah zara, one is only chayiv if you do a real action. For example, slaughtering an animal, incense, libation, prostration. Reish Lakish says man tane ishtachava. Who is the opinion that says prostration? Yechayiv. For that, Rabbi Akiva, he da'amar lo ba'inan maisa. So Rabbi Akiva holds that you don't need a maisa. So we'll say it's interesting. The Gemara understands over here that a shtachava, prostration itself, is not even such a maisa. For Rabbi Yochanan says, no, afilu tema rabbanon, kfifas kamas l'rabbanon, have maisa. The act of bending your posture, in other words, prostration, that's considered to be a maisa. Hashta l'reish lakish kfifas kamaso. Hashta l'reish lakish kfifas kamaso l'rabbanon l'havi ma'isa. So now, according to Reish Lakish's understanding of the Rabbanon, even bending down, right, prostration, is not considered to be a ma'isa. Hakashas zra'osav the bal ov havi ma'isa. Could flapping your arms for a bal ov be a ma'isa? Ki kam Reish Lakish naim Rabbi Akiva. You're right. Reish Lakish is saying according to Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva seems to say really you only need just a very minimal ma'isa. Aval Rabbanon, no. But for the Rabbanon, ultimately, again, one does not need any kind of Maisa at all. I'm sorry, according to the Rabbanon, you'll need a greater Maisa. Ihachi, Yatsa Megadef Ubal, right? Ihachi, Yatsa Megadef Ubalcho Mibaile, Ella Amar Ula, Bimekata L'Shade. Okay, so Ula says, what's the case over here? The case is where you're actually offering incense to a shade. That's the case. There's a Maisa. I'm offering up incense to a shade. Gemara says, 1 second. Amrli Rava, Mekata L'Shade Oved Avodas Kochavimu. I don't understand. Is offering up incense to a shade, is that considered to be avodah zarah? In other words, it's actually interesting. We've never really seen this before about serving shadim, right? Offering up incense to a shade. Is that considered to a demon? Is that considered to be avodah zarah? Ela Amar Rava b'mekater lechaber. So ultimately, what's happening over here? You're going ahead and you're offering up incense in order to conjure up something. Now, I was saying, if you look at Rashi over here for just a moment, Rashi says lechaber. It is 6 lines up from the bottom. Eino mekater l'shem elokos el diaktara nasa machashefos lechaber hashedim lekan. So, I say, interestingly enough, what's happening over here is as follows: one is offering up incense in order to go ahead and conjure up a group of shadim. So apparently, again, that is going to be problematic. Amrle Abaye, hamekater lechaber chover chaverhu. So I'll say this is another thing. Interestingly enough, in the same section of Ov and Yedoni is also chover chaver, right? So what we have over here is Ov is summoning up the dead through the armpit. Yedoni, summoning up the dead through the mouth, although we'll see it's a bone in the mouth. And apparently, chaver is summoning up groups of shadim. Groups of shadim. Okay, so the Gemara says, so the chover chaverhu in. So the Gemara says, v'atorah amra chover zu b'skila. So apparently, again, this act of summoning up a group of shadim is in and of itself an Isser Dorai. So I'm punishable by skila. So Tana Abanon, chover chaver. So what is a chover chaver? Echad chaver gadol, ve'echad chaver katan. So I'll say this is interesting. Now the Bryce understands a little bit differently. So what is chover chaver? So this refers to chaver gadol. What's a chaver gadol? So Rashi says over here, this refers to someone who uses some types of sorcery to gather up groups of animals, right? Like an animal whisperer, right? Someone who's gathering up groups of animals through some type of incantation. This is chaver gadol, v'echad chaver katan. Or even if you're just summoning up a small group of animals, v'afil nechashim v'akravim. Even if you're summoning up snakes and scorpions. Amar Abaye, hilchach man dit summon zibura v'akrava af agav lekamechabein delo lisku aser. So therefore, both say even if someone who goes ahead and uses sorcery to go ahead and gather together zibura, a bee, and scorpions. Now, why am I using sorcery to gather together bees and scorpions? Because I don't want them to harm me. So here, my kavana is not really for sorceric purposes. I don't know if that's the word, but I like it, right? But rather, again, my kavana over here is to avoid any type of damage. So I'm using some sorcery to go ahead and gather up the bee and the scorpion. It's still aser. It's still aser because the act of using sorcery to go ahead and gather any kind of animals is going to be problematic. Rabbi Yochanan, Maishna, the Kfifas Komaso, Rabbanan Havi Maisa, Vakimas Svasaval. So now we're going back for just a second. Now, according to Rabbi Yochanan, so we'll say, why is it? According to Rabbi Yochanan, according to his understanding of the Rabbanan, the act of prostration is a Maisa, but yet the movement of lips is not a Maisa. Right? So prostration is a Maisa, movement of lips, not a Maisa. What's the pshat? Amarava, shiny megadef, hoil v'yesh nobelibo. Now, both say megadef is different. Megadef is different, right? Blasphemy is different. Why? Because they both say the ikar of blasphemy in general is not even as much about what you're doing with your lips, but the ikar of blasphemy is really about what's occurring inside of your heart. Look at Rashi, the last Rashi on the daf. Rashi says, Ho v'yesh nobelibo, ikar chiyav haba alav, taloi belev. When it comes to blasphemy, right, the real issue over here is not even what you say with your lips. but rather it's about what's occurring inside of your heart. Shemiskavim levarech Hashem. Person has in mind to curse HaKadosh Baruch Hu chas v'shalom. Shafilu mevarech Hashem kol hayom ve'in b'libo klapi maylo ela shelas Hashem ledavar acher umechaneo b'shem yuchad umekalo inu mischayev. Rabbi says it's actually very interesting. The only way megadef is aser. Let's say chas v'shalom, a person goes ahead and curses the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but in his heart doesn't have kavanah to do so. Technically speaking, the Gemara is suggesting it's not aser. It's not aser. The ikar of megadef is only when you have this ill intent to curse HaKadosh Baruch Hu in your heart, and then that ill intent manifests itself in some verbal expression. But if the verbal expression is there without the intent, that's not megadef. That's not megadef. So because the ikar of megadef is really what's happening in your heart, and the verbal expression is kind of just the actualization of the act, all you need is a verbal expression. So the movement of the lips is enough to make you chayiv. But in general, we say that a maisa really requires something more significant. So we'll say, so look what's happening over here. In the world of maisa, action really has to be something significant. To the point that even prostration, according to many opinions, is not really a significant action. Megadef, blasphemy, is the exception. Because blasphemy, the real ikar of what's happening is what? Is what's happening inside of my heart. And the verbal expression is just like the icing on the cake. But in general, you need a real ma'aseh. We'll say, there's a tremendous, let's pause here for just a second, because there's a tremendous Moshe Haskell in all of this. What's the tremendous Moshe Haskell? I will say, in general in life, what do you need? Or as someone said, sometimes in life, right? Sometimes in life, or all the time in life, we'll say, what do you need? What do you need in order to affect change? What do you need? What do you need? You need a maisa. You need a maisa. You have to do something. You have to do something. What you think doesn't matter. What you say doesn't matter. What matters in life? What you do. What you do. I will say this is such a tremendous thing because we go through life and we have beautiful plans and goals and dreams and aspirations and yarchikala, kabbalas. And I will say at the end of the day, none of it matters unless it finds its expression in dynamic activity. A life filled with dreams, goals, aspirations, and talk is very nice, but it's meaningless. In order for anything that we dream, that we aspire, that we think about, that we're makabel, to be meaningful, it's got to find its expression in dynamic activity. Life of a yid is a life of action, is a life of dynamic activity. But yet, what you think and what you feel and what you dream is still important. Because at the end of the day, that's the basis, right? That's the foundation. In other words, action doesn't just occur by itself. Action often is the result of what you think in your heart, what you want to accomplish. So lest you think that the dreams, the goals, the aspirations, the kabbalas are not important, they're dramatically important. Because we'll say that's the laboratory for dynamic life activity. The problem is all too often we kind of flatline by the dream, goal, kabbalah, level. We have to take what we dream, what we think, what we're makabel, and we just have to bring it to the olam ha'asiyah. But even in that world of dynamic activity, Rabbi saying, what's the definition of activity for a yid? What's the definition? So it's got to be something dramatic. You see over here that hishtachava, a little bit of movement is not enough. A maisa requires something dramatic. A maisa requires something incredible. Something I will say that the world can see, that I can see. We'll say, when you bow down, you could bow down just a little bit, you could bow down a lot. It might not even be that noticeable. For maisa to be real maisa, it's got to be something significant, incredible. Amud Beis, Master Rabbi Zera. So let's go a little bit weiter. So Master Rabbi Zera raises a kasha, Yatsu Edim Zomin, She'ein Bahen Maisa. So remember again, the Gemara points out over here that Edim Zomin are pata from carbon. Right? They're pata from carbon chatos. Why? Because there's no Maisa. So the Gemara says, no Maisa, va'amai halesnu belief. Right? Ultimately again, but remember, Edim Zomin, both say, how does a person provide aid? How does a person come and aid zomim? How does he do it? Ultimately, again, through speech, through dibur, through speech, right? So lamaisa, again, how can you say that it's not? How can you say that it's not a maisa? Amarava sheni idim zolmin hal v'yeshnu b'kol v'kol l'Rabbi Yochanan lav maisahu. So because the essence of edim zolmin is b'kol, is just again through their speech. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, speech is not a maisa. I have a ha'itmar. Is that true? That kol, that a voice is not a maisa. So listen to this. The Gemara says chasma b'kol v'nhiga b'kol. So this is very interesting. We'll say the halacha is that when your animal is threshing, you're not allowed to muzzle it. Lo sachsum shar b'disho. Right? So my animal is threshing. You have to allow the animal to eat while it's threshing. You're not allowed to muzzle it. So let's say my animal is threshing and I yell at it. I say, don't eat. Don't eat. So sometimes I guess I've never done this before. Might be a good yachikal activity, right? But Lamaisa, Hillel, could we get this in today? Right? So Lamaisa, so apparently I guess if you yell enough, right, the animal gets scared and doesn't eat. That's called chasma b'kol. I'm muzzling the animal with my voice. Or for that matter, again, let's say I go ahead and I put two different species of animals under one yoke. And I say, move. I say, move. Right? So the mice again, then they move. So either I muzzle the animal with my voice, or I move them together with my voice. So that's kilayim. The halach is yechayiv. Yechayiv. But one second, I've only done an action with my voice and nothing else. Yet you see that you're still chayiv. What do you see from here? What do you see from here? That again, that which you affect by your call. Right, the Ma'aser, so in other words, so you have a voice activated. So you see that call ultimately again does affect change. So what's going on over here? Rabbi Yochanan says, "Chasma b'kol v'nhiga b'kol." Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayiv Reish Lakish Amar Pater. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayiv Akimas Pev Havi Ma'isa. Rabbi Yochanan says you're Chayiv. Why? The act of going ahead and curling your lips, right? Movement of your lips is considered to be a Ma'isa. Reish Lakish Amar Pater Akimas Pev Lo Havi Ma'isa. Reish Lakish says your pater, because Reish Lakish says the act of moving your lips is not a ma'isa. So no, could very well be the edim zomin is different. Why are both saying? Because interestingly enough, edus in general, this is fascinating. Edus in general is not really about what you say, but rather what is edus really about? What is edus really about? What you see, right? And everyone agrees that seeing is passive. Seeing is passive, right? There's no maisa involved in re'iyah. So it's fascinating that when it comes to eidos, the essence of eidos is really passivity. Passivity. And therefore, Allah maisa, there's no carbon chatos by idim zomi, which is really quite fascinating. Which I will say also, another tremendous Musar skill, right? In life, so often we see things, right? We see things, and we become inspired by the things that we see. But it's important to understand that when you become inspired by things that you see, that is passive inspiration. What happens to passive inspiration? What happens to passive inspiration? We all know this. Easy come, easy go. Right? Passive inspiration, it comes in. I see something, amazing. If you don't do something with it, it evaporates. Somebody says, it's a beautiful idea. Rabbi Yitzchak Berdichev says, the Rebbe says, that when you see, essentially he's describing passive inspiration. When you see something in life that inspires you, the Rebbe says you have to take that inspiration, you have to plug it into something concrete. To the point that Rebbe says, even if you just open up a chumash and you just read, Va'idaber Hashem al Moshe Leimar, at least what you've done is, you've taken that passive inspiration, right? You've seen something inspired, you've taken the passive inspiration, and you plugged it into something concrete. So at least now you have that pasuk. At least you've taken something that was passive inspiration, you plugged it into something concrete. Incredible. All right, let's go weiter. Ella Amarava, Shiny, these are good. Havia Shamaria, Tanabanon, Baal Ov, supposed to say back to Ov and Yidoni. This is interesting stuff. Baal Ov, what's Ov? Zehamedaber bein haprakim umi bein atzila yadav. So the Brisa says like this, what's Ov? So again, all of this is necromancy, right? All of this is communicating with the dead. So how does the Ov communicate with the dead? So ultimately, again, he speaks with the dead. Now this is interesting. Bein haprakim, so bein haprakim means on the joints. So apparently, again, So you can speak to the dead through the joints of the body, the knees, the elbows, the knuckles. That's where the spirits rest, okay? Or armpits, right? Armpits is always the safe way to go, right? But Lamaisa, so again, either through armpits or through, I will say, by the way, I just want to point out, we laugh at this. There was something. There was something, right? Because again, the Torah goes out of its way to prohibit this type of kishuf, this type of sorcery, which means that at some point in the world, this koach, this power did exist in some way, right? Yidoni, what's Yidoni? Zehamaniach etzem yadua befev u'mendarim me'elav. So Yidoni puts some type of bone in his mouth and communicates with the dead through the bone. The Gemara raises the kasha, v'haya ka'ov me'eretz kolecha, my love the mishtaiki arche. So again, the Gemara asks on the pasuk, isn't that the ov communicates with the dead from the grave? In other words, that the dead is talking from the grave. To which the Gemara says, lo de mishtaiki, my love the mishtaiki arche, lo de salak v'yasa ben apraki mishtai. No, we're talking about the dead rested either between the joints and the armpit and spoke like that. Tashma. Vatomra ishal shol elokim ra'isi olimina aretz. So we'll say this. Remember again, this is actually one of the fascinating stories. King Shaul, went to one of these necromancers to raise the spirit of Shmuel Hanavi. And by the way, it worked. It worked. So this necromancer, this was a woman, says to Shaul, I literally again elokim ra'isi olimina aretz. I saw literally Hashem, she meant the spirit of Shmuel, rising up from the earth. My love the mishtaiki arche. Was she not communicating with the spirit of Shmuel from the grave? Lo diyasa ben aprakim umishtai. No, the spirit of Shmuel rested on the joints of this lady and communicated like this. Okay, so we'll say interesting brayso. Tan Rabbanan, Bal Ov. How did Ov communicate? So the Gemara says, Echad hama'ale bizichuro ve'echad hanishal bigolgoles. All right, so this is an interesting one, right? I'm not sure exactly how you get into this line of work, right? But Lamaisa. So apparently there was the ability to go ahead and raise the dead through the zichruso, through the makomila, through the male member, right? That's how you go ahead and it communicates like that. Like I said, everybody's got to find their talent, right? So Lamaisa, right? Again, got to carve out your niche, right? So Lamaisa, so whether you go ahead and you communicate with the dead like this. I'm not sure how you discover that talent, right? But Lamaisa again, good. So the Gemara says, or whether you speak to skulls, right? So again, you could communicate again through the makom, through the male member, or you could go ahead and communicate with the dead through a skull. So the Gemara says, ma bein zelozeh, a skull. Right? What exactly is the difference between the two? I don't know. The difference seems kind of obvious, right? But Lamaisa, so the Gemara says, I'll tell you what the difference. Ma ben zelazeh, ma le bezichuro eino ola kedarko, ve'eino ola b'shabes. So apparently, again, if you raise the dead through your own body, the dead doesn't come up. The spirits don't come up in the normal way, right? Kedarko. In other words, they don't come up like head first, right? They come up feet first. Furthermore, again, apparently it doesn't work on Shabbos. Okay? Nishal bilgulgolas, but if you summon up the dead through a skull, ola kedarko, the spirits come up in the normal way, va'ola b'Shabbos, and ultimately, again, and they come up on Shabbos as well. The Gemara says, ola lehecha salik hakamei manachle. What are you talking about? If you're talking to a skull, what is about the spirits coming up? The skull is right there in front of you. You're right. What it means is, if you raise the dead through a skull, it means again, ultimately, and the dead and the dead communicate in a normal way, and also communicate on Shabbos. Okay, so we'll say the Gemara tells an incredible story over here. Va'af she'elazu shal Turnus Rufus es Rabbi Akiva. So we'll say Turnus Rufus. Turnus Rufus was a tremendous Rasha. Right? Also went ahead, Greek general. So I had this conversation with Rabbi Akiva. What did he say? Amar lo, Uma yom mi yomayim. So the Gemara says, Turnus Rufus was asking Rabbi Akiva the following shaila. He says, you Jews say that Shabbos is a unique day. What makes Shabbos so special? What makes Shabbos so special amongst the days? Amar lo, Uma gever miguvrin. So Rabbi Akiva said to Turnus Rufus, what makes you more special than other people? Right? Why you more, right? You're asking why Shabbos is more special than other days. I'm asking you, Turnus Rufus, why is it that you are more special than other people. Amrle, the Marit Savi. So Turnus Rufus says, because the Caesar, right, or my ruler appointed me as a chashav a person. That's what makes me. To Rabbi Akiva responded, Shabbos nami the Marit Savi. Okay, so your ruler said that you're chashav, that's why you're chashav. So our ruler, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, said that Shabbos is chashav. And because our ruler said that Shabbos is chashav, that's why Shabbos is going to be chashav. Amar lehachi kamin alacha. Turnus Rufus says, no, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm asking as follows. Miyemer daha'idna shabsa. How do you Jews know that you have the right calculations? How do you know that the day you say is Shabbos? Maybe you got your count wrong. And maybe tomorrow Shabbos, maybe yesterday Shabbos. How do you know? Amar lahu, so listen to this. Rabbi Kiva said like this. So Rabbi Kiva, Nar Sabbatyon Yochiach. So he says the Sabbatyon river proves it. Because apparently Rashi points out over here, the Sabbatyon river was a very turbulent river. But on Shabbos, it was tranquil. Isn't that incredible? On Shabbos, it was tranquil. Right? Bal Ov Yochiach. The Ov also proves this. Why? Because the Ov could summon up the dead 6 days of the week, but the Ov can't summon up the dead on Shabbos. Kivro shel Aviv Yochiach, shein ma la'ashan b'Shabbos. So listen to this. Furthermore, Rabbi Akiva says, Turnus Rufus, your father's grave will prove this. Why? Because he says, Turnus Rufus, go to your father's grave. Every day of the week, your father's grave, there's smoke emanating from your father's grave. Why? What did that show? Turnus Rufus' father was a big Rasha, and he was burning in Gehenna. So again, Rabbi said the halacha is that Gehenna, right, those who are in Gehenna, so they suffer in Gehenna Sunday through Friday. But on Shabbos, everyone gets a respite from Gehenna. So he says, Turnus Rufus, go to your father's grave on Shabbos, and you'll see the smoke is not coming up. The smoke is not coming up from his grave. Amar lo, so Turnus Rufus was very offended by this. He says, Biziso, Baishto, Vikiolaso. You have embarrassed my, right, you have degraded my father, you have embarrassed my father, and you've cursed my father. So as I say, interestingly enough, apparently Turnus Rufus was very offended by Rabbi Akiva's statement. Very offended by Rabbi Akiva's statement, and halacha l'maisa was taken aback by that. All right, Shoel Ov, Hainu Darish Halamesim. The Gemara says, isn't it the same thing? Shoel Ov and Darish Halamesim. The pasuk is repetitive, isn't it? Isn't it the same thing? Darish Lamesim Kidisanya. The Darish Halamesim. So this is incredible. What is Darish Halamesim? Zehamariv Atzmo v'holik v'lam b'beis hakvaras kadesha tishra alav ruach toma. So Darish Halamesim is someone who starves himself and goes to sleep in the cemetery. So why does he do this? In order that the spirits will rest upon him and he'll be able to go ahead and have a little bit of a power of kishuf. So this is apparently how people try to acquire powers of sorcery. That is incredible. When Rabbi Akiva would get to this pasuk v'dorei shalamesim, he would cry, Hayabocha. And he would say as follows, if someone who goes ahead and deprives himself of physical enjoyment of eating and goes to sleep in the cemetery could have this access to these impure power. So Hamariv Atzmo, first white line, Hamariv Atzmo Kedesha Tishalav Ruach Tara Alachas Kama Vakama. Rabbi Akiva says, listen to what Rabbi Akiva is saying. If deprivation allows one to access all of these kochos of Tumah, then imagine what deprivation does to allow us to access Kedusha. Right? But what are we going to do? But Rabbi Akiva said, Aval ma'aseh, sha'avanosenu garmu lanu. But what should I do? Because at the end of the day, our averos create a distance between ourselves and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shne'emar, im avonosechem hayu mavdilim beinechem lebein Elokeichem. So Rabbi said, this is a incredibly profound Gemara. So Rabbi Akiva was saying like this, right? I would say, how do you access the kochos of Tumah? You go out and you deprive yourself of some food. You go to sleep, right? Deprive yourself of a comfortable bed. Go to sleep in the cemetery, and suddenly you're able to access all of these kochos of Tumah. So Rabbi Akiva says, remember, it's like Klal Gadol. Whatever is true for Tumah is always true for Tara. So Rabbi Akiva says, a little deprivation allows you to access the kochos of Tumah. Alachas kama v'kama, a little deprivation allows us to access the kochos of Tara as well. But what could we do? because we're so distant from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that somehow Kedusha becomes so inaccessible to us. But Rabbi say, Rabbi Akiva is teaching us something incredible. If you want Kedusha in life, what do you need? Rabbi say, there is one thing you need in order to access Kedusha, and that is sacrifice. Sacrifice. You can't have everything. So what am I willing to give up for the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And Rabbi say, this is true on every single level, right? I can't have tefillah b'tzibur unless I'm willing to give up sleep, right? I can't have shir unless I'm willing to give up time from work. Anything you want, there's you ever hear the phrase, right? I want my cake and eat it too. That was coined by a guy, right? Why? Because Yidden don't believe in that. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can have your cake. It's like in life, right? You can't have your steak and have ice cream for dessert. You have to make a decision. You have to choose a team. Life is filled with a series of sacrifices. The greatest disservice that we do about is, a lot of us, I kind of don't want to make a commitment. Why? Because I want to leave all of my options open. Sometimes if you think about it, our greatest challenge in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we'll say, what do we say, right? If we had to look at the conversation we have with God, how does it go? It goes something like this. I love you so very much, but, what's the but? I'm not really ready to settle down. I have commitment issues. I think we should see other people, right? In other words, it's not you, it's me. I'm not ready to commit to you. Why? Because commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes with a whole series of sacrifices. And I'm just not willing to sacrifice. Well, if you're not willing to sacrifice, there's no Kedusha. If I'm not willing to give up certain things, then by definition, I'm going to be unable to advance my life agenda. That's how Rabbi Akiva cried. If we only realized the sacrifices we need to make in order to become the people we are truly capable of becoming. But yet, Rabbi Akiva says, we're just unwilling to make the sacrifices. And he cried. Because if we would just be a bit more courageous, if we would just be a little bit braver, if we would just be willing to identify the things that I know I need to offload in order to acquire the Kedusha that is truly waiting for me, there is no telling who and what I could truly become. Rabbi Akiva cried because Rabbi say, the ability to sacrifice and reap the benefits of those sacrifices is an opportunity that is waiting for us each and every day. We just have to find the courage. We just have to find the ability to identify the sacrifices, make the sacrifices, and be ready to embrace the Kedusha that is waiting for each of us. Rabbi say, we'll stop over here for today. Shkoyach, everyone. Tremendous daf.